When you have the ads on the road say, don't hire humans, it doesn't help a lot. But media is trying to create that narrative that is going to destroy jobs and all that. But when we look at it, when we go on in reality, objective reality, what we're doing is optimizing tasks, not destroying jobs, right?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Long Game. My guest today is Kenneth Correa, who is the head of 80/20 Marketing, a Brazilian-based firm focused a lot on building AI agents, among many other things. In this conversation, we talk a lot about, you guess, AI, of course, but we talk about some things that people aren't doing. So Kenneth has been building and listening to an AI board for the past 2 years. He does what they tell him. He even wrote a book because his AI told him to do so, and he's been successfully executing on the strategy. So we get into the details about how to actually build that and some of the results, such as 25% top line growth without any increase in headcount over the past 2 years, which is pretty phenomenal results for following an AI and an algorithm. We also talk about different examples that he's seen in the industry, how we are not replacing jobs, and much more. This is a wonderful conversation filled with lots of stories and anecdotes and real world examples of from meatpacking to digital agencies and many other industries that Kenneth has worked in. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Catch you in the next one. So Ken, at the beginning of this year, I remember how everyone was talking about this is going to be the year of agents, right? Last year was kind of the year of LLMs and a little bit before that, but it was really last year was kind of the one where they're kicking off. And we're now in the year of the agent. We're 4 months in, almost entering the 5th month. What is an AI agent? Let's just start with the fundamentals. How do you think of and define an AI agent?
Yeah, of course, this is not some term that everybody uses in the very same way. So I was in New York at the NRF recently, and Salesforce, for example, was talking about AI agents as a customer agent representative. So it's an interaction in a chat. But while working with the intelligent agent networks, that's a network of multiple agents working together, we'd like to think of an agent. I'd like to define an agent as single purpose software that interacts autonomously. So it has to work in the background. It has to be able to use, for example, LLMs and AI without the need of human interference. So whenever you have a piece of software that works by itself, we can call it an agent if it has like a single purpose of what it does. So that's how I like to think of an agent in a group or a network of different agents.
Contrast that then from software, right? So software you can build just in a sense to be able to act independently and autonomously. And then equally with, maybe also contrast RPA, robotic process automation, which is kind of the old school workflow, work stream efficiency, automation efforts.
Yeah, for sure. When we talk about AI agents now in that sense, I think the added layer that we've got compared to RPA is the birth or the coming of large language models. Because now the kind of possibilities, the kind of power that you enable these agents to work with is really something different. Because usually, for example, I've worked with UiPath, for example, in many multiple automations using RPA. And those were all about record screens and click on buttons and fill out forms, for example. But that
kind of like watch me do something and then record it, and then now I can automate it going forward.
That's it. And automate in the sense of like really repeating with very strong, defined logic. Now with LLMs, you're able to assess whatever is going on, for example, in a computer screen. You can understand what is being typed by another user or by the automation itself. You can now rationalize on top of it. So you're really reasoning on top of what was just done. And you can go and say, okay, I think I need to do that again. Something that a human being will do a lot of times. Now the RPA, the AI agent as an RPA, a part of automation, can go on and erase or edit that as well. So I think the leverage that we got now is the ability to have intelligence as a part of an automation.
Intelligence as part of automation. So there were kind of automations before, but the part that makes it an agent is the intelligence layer on top.
Yes, I think that's how the most accepted idea of an AI agent is used in that sense. That's how I like it to think when I'm really applying it or creating a small group of agents or a crew, like Joe Morrow like to call them. That's how I like to think of that. I can put intelligent as a part of that.
Talk about that. You mentioned Corrêa, you mentioned Joao, and there's a lot of different schools of thoughts of we have agents, what do we do with them, right? So camp one is let me build discrete agents. They go and do their tasks. Another is let me orchestrate a bunch of agents. Another is let me use an orchestration layer like Crew AI or AutoGen to orchestrate and kind of corral them. And then you can kind of keep going down the list and saying, okay, are they autonomous? And then there's human in the loop. Are they working hand in hand with humans? Are they, broad swaths of them working on their own and then incorporating humans downstream after they do their work? So you've been doing a lot of hands-on implementation. What are you seeing? What are people building? What design patterns make the most sense?
You know that if you think of the dream of a startup founder, tech startup founder from 2025, which of course is doing something AI, right? Something with, I know they really like to feel like you're gonna get 100% complete workflow, all the loop being done by autonomous agents, and he needs no employees. I've seen some signs in the valley saying you don't need to hire humans anymore and all that. I know that feels like a really beautiful dream for the founders, but in practice terms, like going into the floor of companies and talking to managers all around and analysts, what I'm seeing is whatever works is usually very simple. It's a part of a more broad workflow that, yes, does use AI agents, but always with a human in the loop. I'll tell you some stories. More than 100%, there is a human being. Usually, the earlier we bring the human as a part of the process, the less hallucination issues we've got, because you have someone that can read the room and understand the context, and that's what a human being usually is very good at. And LLMs will sometimes get on a specific word that was mentioned and go haywire after that. So one example I've been working with is pharmaceutical companies. So you got the sales reps that need to visit doctors' offices and hospitals all around. And those guys are driving a lot or taking a lot of Uber rides. They have to be on waiting rooms for most of their day. So it's a job that Gen Z is not really fond of nowadays. So they have a really hard time hiring people. Whenever they hire those guys, they have horrible retention rate. So those guys will go away in a week or two after starting work. What does a sales rep need to do? It needs to get to a doctor's office, needs to connect and log in to a dashboard of data of prescriptions. So which sort of medicine is this doctor prescribing? Other doctors in that region, what are the options and brands and in the industry is the doctor working with? And they need to change that doctor's mind. That's why they are sales. They're not selling the medicine to the doctor, but they need to convince the doctor to do that. So they need to be fully aware and understand completely about the product in scientific terms. They need to be able to defend that idea with the doctor in the room. And they need to know what to say for every different specific doctor. So now, since we're having this rotation,
so that, that's the normal human job of a pharmaceutical sales rep. Yeah,
that's it. But now, when you add the attrition, people leaving all around, very time to hire, you really need to optimize the work for these people. And one thing we learned with human beings is salespeople are very good at sales, but they are not analytical by definition. We're trying to train.
That's why they never update the CRMs after they take their meetings.
Definitely a problem. So what we did was we created a small network of agents. Now we have one agent that goes on and reads all the material on the medicines. So it knows whatever specifics, technical info and all that about the medicine. Another agent that connects to the dashboard. Now it connects, of course, to the API endpoint, but it has access to the data on prescriptions. It reads whatever information they have on that very doctor and other doctors in the area. And when the sales rep, so it's a new hire, doesn't know a lot about a lot of things, when it types the code for the doctor, so I'm visiting this doctor, his license is number 12345. It types that in WhatsApp, which is a huge platform in Latin America. The agent goes, reads the material, reads dashboard information, compare both, and then a third orchestration agent creates what we call the talking points to the sales rep. So now the sales rep only has to read like 3 lines of text, very specific, like you have to mention the risks of medication X, you have to recommend him that a medication Y is safer, and 80% of the doctors in his area are recommending medicine Y. So it's a very small part of the job. You still need the sales rep to make the visit, to be there with the doctor, because the doctor is not looking for that information. The company wants to nudge his prescribing practice. So this is an example of a multi-agent systems with 3 agents working together, specialized. It was created very fast because it's not rocket science, right? Today with RAGs and assistant creation, for example, OpenAI Assistant API, it's very easy to put that up and running. And we use Corrêa to orchestrate that flow. So this is one that is already in production, and it's still got the human in the loop as a part of the process.
I want to ask some questions here. So did you test, I'm curious why that's broken into 3 separate agents rather than, one prompt that's doing something and handing off to another prompt that's doing something and then a third one. Why do they need to be agents rather than prompts connected to each other and transforming the information until you get the output?
Yeah. I know we like to think of AI as a word that means something unique, like AI or AGI will get control of humanity and all that. But it's actually different companies with different tech, with different training models and all that, with different pricing strategies and contracts and all that. So first thing is, whenever we try to create a general agent or general assistant that tries to solve every problem, it hallucinates very fast. It's very easy to get that off track.
Why though? Why?
Because again, if you think of the logic behind a large language model, what it's doing is the input, the prompt that you give it to it, is just trying to select on that latent space of words, whichever word it has to use to answer you back. So now if you give it tasks with very different broad categories of thought, it's going to be the jack of all trades, master of none, in the sense that it will try to do everything very well. And it's very hard to get away from human metaphors, but that's kind of how I like to address it.
We are human after all, and we create in our own image. So,
and the idea of, we create on our own image. That's why it's artificial, right? So what we learned is when you have specialist agents, somebody on the more classical studying of AI could call it the narrow intelligence, you get much better results when you do that. So breaking down the process in multiple steps will give you a lot better results than try to figure it out with only one agent.
Yeah, so this is something that I do find the correlations to how modern society and manufacturing and just business has evolved. The same example exists with the Industrial Revolution. So before then, Henry Ford invented, or is credited with inventing, the assembly line. And before that, they had one skilled laborer build a car from beginning to end, and they could make 3 per week or whatever it was. And then what they realized was, if we take the work that the 17 or the 120 steps that the car has to go through, from welding the fender on and putting in the headliner and doing all of these steps, you break it down and you say, okay, your task, worker number 17, is to just do the headliners over and over and over. They're going to be better at that one simple task versus the generalist. And so the same exact thing applies to AI, and we're just kind of taking the same exact structures that we've been doing for 120 years, and then also in other scenarios, even broader context of how we've been using language and how we, linear sequential tasks and delegation of work is more easily followed than kind of vague, nebulous guidelines. So it's interesting just to see how much it aligns with human design as well for organizations and systems.
Definitely, definitely. And, I did find that out, Elijah, in the worst possible way, because back in December 23, that's when I found out about AutoGen. And now the sales pitch for AutoGen, Microsoft's AutoGen.
If anyone doesn't know, you want to explain AutoGen?
Yeah, sure. So Microsoft created this product called AutoGen. It was a different beast back in December 23. Now it's a little bit more visual. It has a visual interface you can work on. But back in the day, it was all command line and a little bit harder to work with. But again, somebody told me, and that was the sales pitch for Microsoft AutoGen back then, is from prompt to app, right? You can go and say, I need a CRM app to control my sales rep on a pharmaceutical company, and it would possibly create that for you with one single prompt, which is, again, a very nice, dreamy situation for anyone working with tech, right? Yeah. But we started trying it out, and it sucked. I mean, it was unable to deliver anything close to the idea of being useful at some point in time. And again, I was a little bit frustrated because I thought that was AutoGen's fault. Like, this software does not work. And then I jumped in and started testing Corrêa. Again, I had a frustration, changed the technology. Corrêa is still command line, was built on top of LangChain by that time. So Corrêa is an open source orchestrator for multi-agents. And then I took a different approach. Now I started thinking about this specialization and breaking down the...
And did you have the same issues with Crew, or did it feel different?
Actually, for some coincidence, when I started using Crew, I was already impacted by the idea of breaking it down. So my first try with Corrêa was already broken down. And it's a very interesting example, Elijah, because I own a company, a 90-people company. We develop marketing and tech solutions. It's those guys back here.
You got the crew in the background.
Yeah, we do use a lot of AI, but humans are very good at delivering something that AI is not delivering as well. So I have a great team here. And we have a board of directors that we invite in, it's people from outside of our company, to give us advice and to tell us what we're doing right and wrong and all that. And this used to be humans being all the time. But back in January 24th, so this is 1.5 years ago, I was testing Corrêa, and I said, and this is inspired by a Steve Jobs idea in the 80s. Steve Jobs said, what if we could have classes with Plato and Aristotle? Now, with large language models, I am able to create an assistant that has read all Plato's book. And another one, remember specialization, that has read all of Aristotle's book. So in a sense, I can talk to both of these assistants in separate occasions. But what if I can get them both together in a single conversation? So that's when it starts to become the idea of an agent, because it's not only Kenneth with Plato and Kenneth with Aristotle, but Aristotle and Plato can discuss on top of their ideas. That's what we call the mixture of experts. That's really a mixture of experts. I did that with my board. So I created a board member called Gary Vaynerchuk to help me out with marketing. So I don't have him alone. I invited Philip Kotler, which is supposedly the man that created marketing and all that back in the 60s. I also have Seth Godin, which I like a lot and can talk a lot about marketing. So this is my marketing committee.
And this is just something that you internally built on Corrêa by building out the experts, and then what, you have a chat bot with them, or what is it?
Precisely that. I created every single agent separately, fed it with different pieces of literature, whatever was available, and then I inputted my strategic plan for 2024 back a year ago. And I said, okay, guys, this is my company. This is what I'm trying to get happening throughout this year. I sent it over. Now they started chatting with each other. And now, Elijah, the idea is that those interactions that I got were not like just some fanciful character AI, playful stuff I could do. It's not like my digital girlfriend or something like that. I'm getting really specific insight in whatever plans and tactics I had figured out for the company. So the idea of getting the mixture of experts is getting the knowledge from, of course, boosted by a large language model, but the knowledge from these different specialists on top of each other. I like to call that an emerging property. Because when large language models were created, well, they found out by this autocomplete tool, let's call it like that. Some people call it like the stochastic parrot or something like that. They found that it could do math, it could reason, it could understand philosophy and concept. This is an emerging property of a large language model. But now when I put different AI agents working in the very same network, I get emergent abilities from the network itself.
Even though everyone has access to the same LLMs through OpenAI or whichever one you want to talk to, and anyone can feed in the context of here's Aristotle's works or Plato's work. The part that you're kind of talking about is when you have your Seth Godin and you have your Gary Vee and your Phil whoever, you put them in a room, the output between that unique combination of those three experts plus your current marketing strategy and plan for your business, that's the part that you're saying is emergent. That's novel. That's new. That's generating a new idea or new thoughts or new suggestions that wouldn't come about without having these multiple voices in the room. Is that accurate?
That's perfect. Perfect, the depiction of it. And actually, a lot better than the advice I have been getting before from my human board. And they know it.
Interesting.
They heard it. Yeah.
So give me like a comparison. What was one piece of advice from the AI board that just was like, oh my God, this is amazing?
Yeah, sure. Well, let me try to put that into words now in English. But my strategic plan, we do what we call the founder-led marketing. So that's Kenneth, as the founder of the company, is creating the content and boosting my own social media profile and participating in events and all that. So I have been doing that.
Face that someone can relate to, that can connect to. They understand what you stand for, and the company stands behind you.
That's it. Nobody cares about
Got
the
it.
company. They care about the human being. So let's create a connection with the human being. The human being will bring the business in. So I have been doing that for some years now. And I was going to do only that in this coming 2024. So now, one of the challenges that we had is we're trying to reach larger and larger companies, usually leaders in their sectors. And I was trying to believe, we were believing, our premise was that being on the top management events in Latin America, putting me in front of those people would be enough to get me contracts and all that. But then one of the tips that I got from Michael Porter, agent, not the real guy, was like, you need to use something to get better authority on it. And you should write a book. And I'm like, okay, that's a good idea. Somebody has told me that in the past. I never did that. So now Seth Godin goes on and say, but it's not only a book. You should publish your book into one of the top leading business schools in the world. That was his idea at the time. Because now you're going to be able to use as a part of your discourse that you published the book at this whatever university that you did. So now I'm affiliated in the largest business school in Latin America with FGV, where I teach emerging tech. But how could I do that in international space? So that was a combination of idea between Michael Porter by suggesting the book idea, and then on to Seth Godin by saying I should publish it other than publishing it in Brazil, doing that in America, especially where the business schools were at. And then it finally ended up happening because I crossed into this teacher at the MIT, and then I got it published right there. And then things went on after that. So this is something that happened in reality. I'm really using the book as a part of my personal marketing strategy on top of the ideas coming from these guys. I don't know if it's a very...
let's just take a moment. We're in 2025, right? We're only 2.5 years into AI existing or LLMs existing in the modern form. And you're literally talking about you wrote a book because AI told you to do so. Yes? That's crazy.
Yes. I actually have been doing for the past 2 or 3 years. I have been doing whatever AI tells me to do. Yes. I'm thinking now that John Connor would not be proud of me, right? That's it, man. I'm doing it.
Skynet would be very proud of you, though.
Definitely. So yeah, it's making a lot of sense. And something else, Elijah, that occurred is whenever we started working with Gen AI, that's 3 years ago now, that's before ChatGPT was out and all that, we were already working with some large language models because we do a lot of social media and we have to monitor people's comments on social media, and we use a lot of tools to get that. But it's very hard to classify the comments. For example, is it positive or negative? You have people that will use sarcasm, for example, which is very hard to use a mechanical machine learning model to understand. But now with Gen AI models, it's so easy to do. So we were already testing that out. And then when we started using the large language models and AI and all that, we said, we could be providing services, AI services for other companies. That could get us like a new revenue line. And we started that. But 3 years into the revolution, I have maybe 6 or 7% of my revenue by providing AI services. We're still doing the good old marketing and tech that we did before. But the thing is, we have a revenue close to $10 million. So you get a number. That's the number for 2025. That's our projections for this year. 3 years ago was 8 million. And I was like, okay, so this AI thing gets us like 10% productivity boost, 20% productivity boost. We can sell this to other companies, all that. But a company with $8 million of revenue, and I have 70% of my cost being people producing or creating something. Shouldn't it be the case that I should do it for my own company? So there is money on the table, right?
Right.
Get the idea. If I have 70% of 80 million, that's $5 million in a year. And I get a 20% productivity boost. We're talking about $1 million years in operational costs that I could cut. And I'll tell you something. Back in 23, we had 90 employees. 24, 90 employees.
That's interesting.
90 employees. But I've grown from 8 million to $10 million.
Right.
And in a service business, it's very hard to get scale, right? Usually, we're completing 16 years next month. We're usually with gold debt, our costs and our revenue will all climb out together. I get a new client, that's amazing. I need to hire more people and all that. And we have been able in the past 2 years and a half, of course, we have been doing whatever AI tell us to do. But in the past 3 years and a half, man, we kept the same number of people and we've grown at least 15, 20% per year.
That's really, well, first of all, that's a huge congrats. And I actually want to take a detour. I think it'll make sense. But do you know Brian Johnson, the founder of Braintree? So the Don't Die. So basically, billionaire has been measuring himself and how to delay aging and eventually don't die. That's kind of his lofty goal.
Skate velocity, that's how they call it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got it.
So one of the things that all of this Don't Die and the Blueprint protocol all came from is this question of, if I could give you an algorithm and you obeyed it perfectly, and in exchange, you live forever, would you do everything that it said? And it is, in a way, the same thing that you're talking about, of doing what an algorithm, doing what a machine that maybe knows more than you or knows better than you or is able to achieve a better plan than you. If it gives you a good result, would you give up, in a sense, free will to follow it? And I think so I'll throw that out there, and I'm curious on your thoughts on that and just kind of exploring that, because you are doing it, you are living it to a degree. I think the other aspect that becomes interesting in this conversation is when we're giving up that free will, we're giving up to an algorithm, to an AI, to an LLM. I think the difference between what we currently do, which is we're all slaves to our phones, and if it pings, you answer it, and if you get a text message, you answer it, and if you get an Instagram notification, you want to click on it, and you open up the YouTube app to go look for something, and then 20 minutes later, you've watched 3 other videos that you weren't actually looking for. So we are already kind of unconscious slaves to algorithms, and we try to have willpower and resist, but algorithms drive a lot of what we do already. I think the difference with this kind of LLM and AI approach is that you get to be the own architect of the algorithm. You get to choose what rules you want to follow and what advice you're receiving, not a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar corporation like Facebook or Google or whoever that is subtly, quietly behind the scenes telling you what to do, and you don't fully know it. So I think we are still talking about algorithms and humans doing what machines and software tell them to do. But I think it's actually in a very positive way because you get to opt into it. You get to build what what are the rules that you want to follow? Who's the mentor that you want to follow? You build your Mr. Miyagi, and then you get to follow that path. So anyway, a lot out there. But I do think even from personal well-being and diet and all these other areas of life, same thing with leading a business, running a business, writing a book, and publishing in the U.S. at MIT. It's following some type of AI or technology-driven decision-making process.
Yes, and I like to think of it in a sense that I am the human in the loop, right? Because I created.
You are your own human in your life loop.
As
That's cool.
Inception as it sounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like to think of that because, of course, I'm not going to execute on every idea because there are plenty of ideas. But being hit by good ideas only, being hit by ideas that are already tailored to my problem, my context, and my strategic plan, we usually like to draw a very good picture of where are we at. How much money we're making, who are our competitors, which products are we growing, where are we losing money and profits and all that. So again, Elijah, I know that people that haven't used this tool, at least as deep as we're using it, I'm talking about AI assistants, I'm talking about creating this network of agents, it's probably hard to see how different can it be. But I really like what Andrew Ng said in his speech, I think a year and a half ago, where once we moved from GPT 3.5 to GPT 4, he was measuring what was the order of magnitude change between those two models. And since we have a lot of benchmarks to do this comparison, it was very easy. He selected one of those for his point. And he showed that you can move the precision from, 45% with GPT 3.5 to up to 75% with GPT-4. But that was tested doing one shot, prompt. But whenever he created a small network with two adversarial agents or a little bit larger one with reflection as a part of that process, mixture of experts or something like that, he could use GPT 3.5, which at that time was cheaper than GPT-4. With a network of LLMs with GPT 3.5, he would get as high as 97% in that very same benchmark. And at that time, he said, if you want to know what GPT-5 is going to look like, because that's a question in everyone's mind, and OpenAI has been delaying the launch for GPT-5, if you want to get and feel it a little bit, it's easy. Create a network with GPT-4 or 4.5 assistants. And I do feel, in a sense, that in my company, at least, I'm already working with GPT-5 for the past year and a half because I'm working with these networks. That's the kind of order of magnitude better results and replies and ideas and plans that we're getting from these networks. So that's why I position it as this new abilities, this emergent ability out of that system. So yes, I'm enjoying as a business owner, because I'm making part of this money is going to my pocket. I'm enjoying a lot. I have been enjoying a lot following the ideas of my multi-AI agent system. Yeah.
It's interesting too, because again, it's so obvious. It's so obvious in hindsight. If you are the smartest person on the planet, you can only go so far. You literally can only go so far with whatever you're working on, whether it's building a company or trying to find a cure for a disease or whatever it is. You have to rely on other people. And if you just look objectively, if you benchmark the smartest person on the planet versus 20 average people, all like both sides trying to achieve the same goal, the group of 20 is probably going to go further. And I know that's kind of vague and whatever, but generally speaking, if you group together people, it's gets better outcomes.
And again,
And you're just grouping together.
For that point, something that we learn, again, this is a practitioners, I'm sharing you what practitioners have is whenever I create these assistants, specialized assistants, using different large language models. So one is
like one from, yeah, go ahead.
One is Mistral. The other is GPT. And this one is Copilot. And this other one is Gemini. You get even better answers.
Interesting.
In a sense, you're getting the best out of each model combined with the best out of each specialist content, the content you can rack there, and the best of their interaction, which is the novel part of that. So it's maybe GPT-6 in that sense.
That's cool. And so can we get down to like the specifics? So there's so many different ways in which you could do this.
Sure.
You specifically, are you using Corrêa and then you have a simple chatbot interface where it runs it through all 6 of them, or do you ask a question to each one? Like, how do you actually have this orchestrated?
Yeah.
Really speaking, like if someone wants to duplicate your process and do the Kenneth method of building a board, how do you do that?
Yeah. I have created an assistant. So I fed the documentation for Corrêa into an assistant. I've talked a little bit about my process and how I like to work. So it writes the code for me.
And what's an assistant? Like, even define that.
Yeah.
ChatGPT?
I get into, it's actually GPT as a LLM, but it's called an assistant. I log into OpenAI's playground for developers. I click assistant, create new assistant. Now I can give it a name. I can give it a prompt, a system prompt, and I can upload files for its vector database. So it's really into that platform. I have that for writing code, so I don't need to worry about writing all the code for that work. Now, I need to create every assistant. So if I log into my OpenAI dashboard right now, I probably have 200, 300 different assistants. And those are all just different specialists. Some of them are leaving people with books published. Some of those, like I have Sun Tzu on my strategy board. So this guy is like 2,000 years old. So I've got his book there as well, because I can use his books, right? It's past 70 years. It's free, it's free to use. So
a little bit past 70 years. Yeah, I think so.
As you bad. So I create one assistant for each one of the specialists. Now I get back to my original assistant that writes the code and said, okay, now I want you to create my marketing board. You're going to use assistant. And then I give it I copy and paste the ID. I did this, and I did that. Create a network for me to discuss marketing. And then it writes the code. And then I run it locally on my computer. That's how I'm doing it. So it's connecting to, for example, in this case, to OpenAI, to use every assistant in that process, but it's running locally on that computer. And then I use the terminal for the Mac terminal to read it, to interact. I didn't create a graphics user interface. I'll tell you, Elijah, some people have approached me to create this as a product, which I really think is a nice startup idea. I could be an investor. I could be a client for this product, but I didn't take the time to create it as a product. But practical terms, this is how I've created my first ones.
Yeah. No, thanks for walking us through. It's funny. I've done this a few times. I've never done it from a sustained perspective. So, I've built a couple different thought partners where I fed in different personas, more of like, I want this person and this person, that person. Here's a couple snippets of why I like them, but not actually feeding in a lot of information and then chatting with it over time. And it definitely yields results, but I haven't done it from a ongoing sustained perspective. I mean, you really have a standing board that you check in with on some type of regularity, and it has all this context, which I think is fascinating.
Elijah, I'm more on the tech side with my partners in this company. I had to convince them, right? So the more normal human beings in my board, so my other partners, they didn't buy in the first time when I did it. They thought it was ridiculous or something. But now again, when you start to see the kind of results that you get, when you really put in the work, feeding the data, giving it context, and you spend that time, it's really something. Again, from your example, I'll say that based on what you described. You went on login on Character AI and you're talking to Gandalf, the wizard, right? It's fun, but it's that, right? It's the most what you get. If her prompt was, please behave like Steve Jobs, and you started chatting with that assistant, it's only going to be fun. But in our case, we
Right.
really took it seriously. It's different. It's you're gonna have to believe in me or try it out for yourself. But it's really something different. But
Well, even if no one wants to believe in you, I think same costs and 25% top line revenue growth, which is pure profit basically if your headcount's staying the same. Believe in that. Believe in that.
now you get me. That's it. Perfect, man. And again, I think you can sense that when you use, for example, just reasoning models. Anthropic's Claude 3.7, for example, or you can use Gemini 2.5 Pro right now. GPT has the O3, if I'm not wrong. Those reasoning models will give you a sense of the different answer you will get once it goes back and forth and it creates a plan and follows the plan and then summarizes the answer. This is what is happening in the background with my board members, right? This is the very same benefit that you get. And remember, that's when DeepSeek got its moment back in January, because they were the first reasoning model to be put out there. And the first people who tried it out, I know who was the early adopter that tried it out and sent it out to the world, because I have been using DeepSeek for, I don't know, since July 24. They were out already. But their reasoning model, R1, if I'm not wrong, when that came out, it was the first time some people experienced the benefits of a reasoning model. And the reasoning model is a mixture of experts, just like I have on my board.
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. I appreciate you walking through in such detail. In terms of other applications that you've been seeing, other use cases, we've gone into kind of the mixture of experts. We've gone into reasoning models and just reasoning in general, and what ChatGPT 5 is going to look like. What else are you seeing that maybe isn't talked about that much with systems designs, architecture design, agent design, reasoning, etc.?
Sure.
What else is being missed?
Let me tell you one other example that I'm working with. There's this Brazilian company who are the largest meat packers in the world. They have, 20% of the market share in America, North America, United States, and they're huge. So they created a new factory for them, new factory plant, and they wanted it to be like a flagship industry for meat packing, so everybody could see how amazing they are and all that. So they bought the most expensive and new machinery. Those are all like what we call the industry 4.0. So it's got all its sensors. So it not only, they weigh the beef. They can use photogrammetry to see the color of the meat. So it's crude or raw or all that. And they have the throughput of the production. Everything being done by the machinery is being measured as well. So when the factory was done and ready, they started running it. So the factory is working and cutting the beef and getting all ready. And then the owners were like, okay, but this really looks like our other factories. There's nothing different. There's nothing new in that sense. Where's the 4.0? And they said, well, actually the machines are generating the data. We have all the data stored. We have a data lake. And so IT did its job. The data lake's amazing, but we couldn't hire the data scientist. We don't have the
learnings, the insights
to get the insights out of that. And they were like, okay, so do it. Now they're 3 months in and they cannot find that. I don't know, Elijah, if you're having an easy time finding data scientists, but that's something very rare because now we have a global workforce in Brazil. Everybody who is close to a decent data scientist is working for dollars or pounds and all that. So we lost all of those guys. So I approached IT and I said, I think we can create the data scientist agents. So what we did, they have 4 different machinery, one for weight, one for color, one for cutting the meat, and the other for packing that has these capabilities of data generated. So again, building on top of that learning of the specialization of tasks, I built 4 different agents. I fed them with that machine's manual. So I have all the technical specificities of how that machine works, the details on how the data is generated. It's a CSV file, and this first column is this, the second column is that, and all that. I get that for those 4 different machines. One was from Italy, 2 from Germany, 1 from China. So different languages, no problem. Just fed it to the assistant. Then we define the parameters, like what are the normal parameters of work, minimum and maximum, and what's the range it could work on. So now these agents are run every 50 minutes. They go on, crunch the data, analyze it inside the parameters. If the LLM figures out it's operating under the right parameters, it doesn't say a thing. But now I have a 5th agent, orchestrator agent. If one of the machines, the LLMs, the specialists on the machines, reads the data for that 15 minutes interval and sees something's odd, something is off the chart, something is different from expected, signals, it raises the flag for the orchestrator and said, okay, hi, I'm the specialist in machine this. I was analyzing log for the 2:35 p.m. check, and I found out that this machine is operating 35% above capacity. I know. Now the orchestrator will decide if that's normal or if that's something that should be reported to a human in the loop. So now again, there's a factory operator, a human being, 3 operators working different shifts 24/7. They have a phone with, again, WhatsApp. So they get a WhatsApp from that orchestrator agent saying, you should check on the balance because it's got a 35% off the charts number. So now again, we didn't have the data scientists available. The guy working on the factory floor needed to know how to do predictive maintenance. I think that's how we call it, right? You try to avoid the machines going awry by figuring out and analyzing the data. And now he's able to do that because he's got those 4 agents, one working for each machine, and he's got the orchestrator to let him know if he should go on and check. So now we have Industry 4.0. So trying to solve a little bit of the problems like not having specialized labor is one of the use cases that I'm seeing happening a lot. This is one of the cases I'd like to share.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's interesting too is that you're not, well, you are replacing the data scientist. You're also, it's not like you're replacing this as a whole human that works 40 hours a week doing things. It's we need an expert to be able to solve this one problem or this one area or observe this one thing or crunch some numbers. And so you bring in, it can't do everything. It's not also going out and working on new projects. It's not like a traditional employee, but it's the right slice of intelligence focused on acutely the specific problems that you have. And it is replacing your need for a data scientist to do that specific work.
Yeah, and usually media will just go on and say, oh my God, artificial intelligence is going to kill every job and all that. Of course, when you have the ads on the road say, don't hire humans, it doesn't help a lot. But media is trying to create that narrative that is going to destroy jobs and all that. But when we look at it, when we go on in reality, the objective reality, what we're doing is optimizing tasks, not destroying jobs, right? So that's the very sense.
And even with your business example, it's not that you fire people and replace them with AI. It's that you grow without needing to hire more. And then equally, the people that you could have hired, which you can't find, you literally can't find data scientists. They're going on and doing other things, or maybe they're starting new companies or building new products. And so it's not this kind of destruction. It's just the need for that next hire is lesser than it used to be. And equally, it means that there are more people to go do more things where, supply and demand, maybe different companies pay more. So they go to those companies and make more money, or they go and start something new, or they build a product. So it's not this destructive force that the media would have you believe, I think.
Yeah, that's the narrative I'm trying to put up. And I'll tell you something. I talk with board members and C-level in every different company all around the world. Been to India last year, to Europe, all around, and went to Iceland even, which I didn't know. And it's very, very uncommon. It happened, but not a lot, for some CEO to come to me and say, please bring AI because I need to get 300 people laid off. That's never what they call me for. And I'm talking about closed environment, closed doors meeting that could be said.
Yeah.
Usually what they will tell me is we need to get the workers that we already have more productive
Yes.
or augmented, right? I will say that I have a telecom company I work with. They had a different narrative. They were like, okay, we need to take humans out of that. It needs to be 100% AI. But they didn't want to lay people off. What they wanted is to get better customer service 24/7 with less error and more precision. So that made sense. But for most of the other companies, like, I want to use those human beings that we already have on board to do stuff that humans are very good at. Let work like analyze the CSV files and all that, ETL, for example, for data analysis, then the robots can take it over. Nobody will argue against that, right?
It frees humans up for highest and best use. That's the thing that I've been talking about for a while, and I think it does. It frees human. The same thing happened with the agricultural revolution over the past 10,000 years. It used to take so many humans to work a field to get so many acres of food, and then we had cows. Cows was the new technology with the yoke, and they could plow the fields. The plow was technology, right? And now the amount of food that we can produce per head count is crazy amounts lower with bioengineering and everything else. And it's not that all the people that would be farmers are now unemployed. They're just not farmers. They're doing other things. So I think it's going to be a similar shift. And the argument that other people make is that it's moving so fast. But I think there's still, because it's moving so fast, it also means that there's tons of opportunity to do new things, or new companies are being formed, or new roles that never existed. So we just kind of keep compounding those growth, I think.
Definitely. I have a client in the mining industry, for example. You remember the story of the guy getting into a mine and carrying a cannery? So the cannery will smell and die first, so the human knows it's not safe and all that. We have a mining company working in South America that uses a humanoid robot as the cannery. So now every day in the morning, a humanoid from a Chinese company, Unitree, will walk down the mine. It's got its sensors for tox.
Oh, it literally walks in, and it's
really
a humanoid?
Walks in.
Wow.
Gets in, measures whatever it has, chemicals and compounds and toxic and whatnot, and sends the data over back to station. And now there's a red light and a green light. And that green light will go on because every day a robot sacrifices itself to get in the mine. So again, who is going to argue that we need to get the cannery back? Who is going to argue that we should keep a human in that job, right?
Yeah.
This is, again, going to the crude reality of companies. And I'm not trying to sound naive here. That's the scenario that I see the most. Is really, we're trying to optimize whatever is very manual labor, whatever is hazardous activities that can really affect human beings. For example, the use of human beings to do reinforce human feedback learning feedback for content. That's great if you're looking at LLM's responses. But what if you're looking into child pornography? I don't know. Again, that's not a good keyword for YouTube on the video. But again, if you can get humans away from that, you're driving humanity forward, right?
Yeah. Kenneth, I feel like I could talk to you for hours and hours. I do have another call coming up here, but I want to sneak in, if we have time. You mentioned before we started recording AI as a boss. What does that mean?
I gotta tell you that story, of course. Sure. So again, I'm working with companies in different sectors. I was called by this Swiss bank. So those guys have banks are usually, the financial markets are usually very tied up to strict goals. They are always pushing their employees to sell more and more. When they were analyzing the different positions in the company that they could create automations for, they figured out that the boss, this was a sales manager for that sense, in a bank branch. All he did was arrive at the job on Monday and say, okay, guys, Elijah, this is your goal for the week. Kenneth, this is your quota. Then by midweek, he would see that Elijah's numbers were not very good, and he would call Elijah, try to coach him into selling more or different alternatives and strategies. And by the end of the week, if he hit his goal, he'd say, oh, congratulations for that, and send some emojis. And the same thing for Kenneth in that sense. And they said, we know everybody's talking about automating jobs, and we usually think of the more operational level, but we'd automate the boss job. So they created this agent that, of course, had access to the Salesforce platform to know the sales results, number of leads, time to close, average order value, and all that for every salesperson in the bank. And by the beginning of the week, it had the goals and quotas for every one of those salespeople. Since the bank has a remote operation, everybody's working from home. But at the end, it was just a message in the phone. They use iMessage for that. They exchanged the boss for an AI boss. So the idea looked promising. They did it for 2 weeks. But in the third week, Elijah, we had like this crazy Black Mirror episode happening where nobody was meeting their quotas. So the manager was, the AI manager was trying to coach everybody into selling more and sending messages nonstop. And people were like panicking in that. And they went to human resources to picket against the AI boss. So project, it existed for 3 months before it was put up into work. Existed for 3 weeks, and it was extinct from the company. So
that's funny.
Down to nobody likes to have an AI as a boss. Nobody likes,
not yet, at least.
Especially, nobody likes bosses, but especially AI bosses. I don't think it was fit for the job. It was doing whatever it was taught to do it, but people said it was really toxic working with AI. Boss.
That's great. That's great. I'm sure we're going to have more and more of these stories as time progresses, though, because there are certain functions where it might make a lot of sense to have an AI that has way more context than a human can have, giving advice or direction for something that's maybe doesn't require a whole lot of complexity, and maybe eventually has a whole lot of complexity. Who knows?
Definitely. I'm looking into that. I'm enjoying a lot being seated in the front seat, trying to be a part of that revolution. Of course, if Skynet comes about, I was helping those guys from the start. That's how I like to joke about it.
Kenneth, this has been absolutely eye-opening, super fun talking with you. If people want to connect with you or read your book or work with you, where should they go?
Yeah, sure. Oh, so my book is called Cognitive Organizations. You can find it at cognitiveorganizations.com. And I have been creating a lot of content on LinkedIn and especially on Instagram. So if you look for my name, it's Correa. It's a half American name, half Brazilian name, but I'll have to tell you that story later of where that came from. Well, I'd be happy to chat about and talk about this AI multi-agent systems.
I love it. Thanks, Kenneth.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you check out this video right here. And if you really enjoyed it and you listened to the end, take 2 seconds and share the love so someone else might find it by clicking the thumbs up button and subscribing. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. But click that button.